In the summer of 1944, the Pacific was no longer an ocean. It was a ledger, a vast, blue accounting of empires, where every island was a line item, every atoll a debit or credit in the arithmetic of annihilation. Japan, the rising sun that had scorched Pearl Harbor into history's memory, now clung to its outer ring like a man gripping the edge of a cliff. Saipan was that edge, a jagged thumb of volcanic rock thrust from the Marianas, 1,500 miles south of Tokyo. 7 by 13 miles of coral reef, sugarcane fields, and cliffs that clawed at the sky. To the Imperial Navy, it was the unbreakable hinge of their defense. To the Americans, it was the key to the kingdom. But wars are not won by maps alone. They are lost in the minds of men, where confidence hardens into certainty and certainty into calamity. On Saipan, Japan did not face an enemy army. They faced an evolution, and in the quiet hours before dawn, that evolution stirred like a leviathan beneath the waves. Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner stood on the bridge of the USS Mount McKinley, his command ship, a floating nerve center of radios, plotting tables, and the ceaseless tick of chronometers. Turner was no poet of the sea. He was its engineer. 53 years old, hawk-nosed with eyes like sighting scopes, he had orchestrated invasions from Guadalcanal to Tarawa. But Saipan was different. This was no island hop. This was the Marianas' turkey shoot waiting to unfold, the gateway to Japan's industrial heart. Turner's mind was a calculus of tides, winds, and tonnage. 800 tons of ammunition per day, 2,000 gallons of diesel per hour, enough rice and spam to feed an army that marched on its stomach and its supply lines. He peered through salt-crusted binoculars at the dark bulk of Saipan. The island slept under a canopy of stars, its beaches fringed with barbed wire and coconut log barricades. Japanese defenses, 30,000 troops, bunkers honeycombed into cliffs, artillery nests camouflaged in banana groves. Turner saw none of that. He saw probabilities. The reef breaks at low tide, the wind holds from the southeast. The feint at Tinian draws their eyes west. His orders had been precise. Soften the beaches with 7 days of bombardment, 2,400 tons of shells, enough to crater the moon. Yet he held back the heaviest fire. Why waste mathematics on revelation too soon? Below decks, in the dim red glow of troop compartments, young Marines stirred. Private First Class Eugene Sledge, 19, wide-eyed from boot camp in Alabama, clutched his M1 Garand, its stock worn smooth by anxious thumbs. Around him, the air reeked of seasickness and machine oil. The Marine sergeant leaned in close to his squad, whispering gruffly, "Listen up, you sorry sons of bitches. This ain't Tarawa. No coral tombs here. We hit the beach, we dig in, we push. Navy's got our 6. Those big boys out there'll turn the Japs to paste if they so much as twitch." Sledge swallowed hard, his inner thought a youthful tremor masked by resolve. Tarawa was hell, bodies floating like driftwood. But this feels bigger, like the whole damn ocean's holding its breath. The sergeant clapped a hand on Sledge's shoulder, hard enough to jolt, soft enough to steady. These men were not demigods. They were farm boys and factory hands, fueled by letters from sweethearts and the grim math of survival. 1 bullet per enemy, 1 foxhole per shell. But in their eyes burned the unspoken compact of the Corps, unbreakable, unrelenting. From the heights of Mount Tapachau, Saipan's volcanic spine, 3,000 feet of mist-shrouded rock. Dawn's first blush tints the air crimson. Through the lens of a wide-angle shot, we see the island's underbelly. Trenches snaking through taro patches, Type 95 Hago tanks nestled in revetments like sleeping dragons, their 37mm guns muzzle down in deference to the earth. Camouflage nets drape over 75mm field guns, blending them into the foliage. Sentries in faded khaki patrol the cliffs, bayonets glinting like accusatory fingers. From the heights of Mount Tapachau, the Imperial Japanese Army gazed seaward with the arrogance of ancients. Saipan was no mere outpost. It was the fulcrum of the banzai doctrine, the unbreakable defense. Dig in, bleed the enemy with spirit, Yamato Damashi, counterattack with fanatical fury. It had held at Peleliu, stalled at Biak. Why not here? The Marianas were the inner perimeter, the sacred soil, where Japan's warrior soul would eclipse American materialism. Tokyo's high command had decreed it. Saipan must not fall. It guarded the approaches to the home islands, the bone-in chain, the very breath of the emperor. Lieutenant Colonel Katsutoshi Kawaguchi, 38, scar-faced from Shanghai, peered through his Zeiss binoculars from a concrete observation post. Below, the reef shimmered like shattered glass, the beach a narrow strip of gray sand pocked with dragon's teeth. His men, 15,000 under General Yoshitsugu Saitō, veterans of China and the Solomons, their rifles oiled, their resolve forged in the Bushido code. Kawaguchi's lips curled in a half-smile. The Americans probe, they feint, they falter. We've seen their pattern. Guadalcanal's ghosts taught us that. A radio crackled in the bunker, static like distant rain. The Japanese signal officer's voice came urgent but controlled. "Sir, scout boats report shadows on the horizon. Enemy silhouettes, destroyers perhaps. No transports yet." Kawaguchi let out a low chuckle, waving a gloved hand dismissively. "A reconnaissance, nothing more. Let them come. Our artillery will sing them back to their carriers. Inform General Saitō, the ghosts test the water before the tide turns." Laughter rippled through the bunker, nervous but genuine. These were men who had stormed Singapore, who had watched Allied convoys burn from the sky. Saipan was impregnable. 500 pillboxes, minefields laced with piano wire, civilian militias armed with bamboo spears. The banzai charge was their ace, not a suicide, but a scythe, reaping the weary. And the Americans? Industrial ants, swarming without soul. Japan would shatter them on the reef, as they had at Badio. But deeper in the island's gut, in the command caves of Garapan, another mind turned the wheel of certainty. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, 57, silver-haired, his uniform crisp despite the humidity, paced the lantern-lit chamber. Maps sprawled across a folding table, arrows marking the feint at Tinian, phantom fleets off Guam. Nagumo, the man who had launched 353 planes from 6 carriers at Pearl Harbor, now commanded the First Air Fleet's remnants. Stinging wasps of zeros and vals, grounded by fuel shortages but fierce in intent. His aide, a boyish ensign, poured tea with trembling hands. Nagumo's voice was reflective, like polished stone, his gaze fixed on a photo of his Pearl Harbor strike group. "We struck first and the world trembled. Hawaii was our dawn. Now they come for ours." The aide bowed slightly, his voice steadying. "Admiral, intelligence confirms. The main thrust is north, perhaps Eniwetok again. This is a diversion. Our submarines report no massing." Nagumo nodded, but his eyes, those eyes that had weighed the gamble at Midway, held a flicker. Midway, where luck and hubris had cost him 4 carriers. Saipan was no Midway. Here, the Navy and Army stood united under Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's umbrella. The Banzai fortress would hold. The Americans' vaunted firepower was a bluff. Logistics would betray them, as distance always did. Japan fought for eternity. America for quitting time. Dawn breaks fully now, a molten gold spilling over the waves. Turner's voice booms over the intercom, calm as a weatherman's forecast. "All stations, H-hour -60, bombardment commences at 0542. Marines, your beach is Charlie's. Secure it. Build it. Own it." Explosions stitched the shoreline, first the 5-inchers from destroyers whipping up geysers of sand and coral, then the heavies, 14-inch shells from the California arcing like judgment, slamming into cliffs with thunder that rolls inland like an earthquake's growl. Saipan's face fractures, bunkers erupt in flame, palm trees shear like matchsticks. But not all. Not enough. The Japanese guns, those that survive, crouch silent, waiting. On the beaches, the first Higgins boats grind ashore. Ramps drop with hydraulic sighs. Marines spill out, silhouettes against the surf, garans held high, packs sodden. Captain Louis Chesty Puller. No, wait, this is 2nd Marine Division under General Holland, Howlin Mad Smith. His captains echo the ethos. Forward, always forward. The Marine captain shouts over the roar to his platoon waiting chest deep. "Move. Flank left, watch the wire. Medics up." Bullets snap from the bluffs, sporadic, probing. A Marine crumples, red blooming in the foam, but the line holds. Cranes offload bulldozers, engineers chain-link the reefs. It's not a charge, it's a construction. By 7:30, the first wave, 8,000 men, clings to the sand like barnacles. From Tapachau, Kawaguchi lowers his binoculars. Smoke curls from secondary hits, but the beach crawls with khaki ants. More boats? Already? Kawaguchi frowned now, turning to his officers clustered like crows. "Hold fire on the artillery. Let them commit. This is their Tarawa feint. Exhaust them on the tide." The Japanese lieutenant's response was eager, his fist clenched. "Hi, Colonel. They break upon us like waves on rock." Laughter again, thinner, but defiant. Radios hum with reports. Enemy elements light, probing only. Saitō in his forward HQ receives the wire. Diversion confirmed. Conserve shells. Nagumo, sipping tea gone cold, sketches air patrols, zeros to strafe at noon. The island breathes easy, the fortress stands. But out at sea, the horizon shifts. What was gray silhouette becomes steel forest. Carriers launch CAP, combat air patrol, Hellcats wheeling like hawks. Transports disgorge LSTs, landing ship tanks rumbling over the waves, their bows splitting like knives. Turner, on the bridge, lights a cigarette, unhurried. He murmured to his chief of staff, voice low, almost conversational. They'll laugh at the first wave. Let 'em. By nightfall, we'll give them the punchline. In that moment, as the sun climbed and the sea delivered its cargo, Japan beheld the first landing. A handful of boats, a scatter of men. A test, a feint. The pattern held. America hesitated, probed, revealed its hand too soon. Confidence swelled like the tide they ignored. They thought the first wave was a test, not the beginning of their end. As the morning sun clawed higher over Saipan, casting long shadows across the sugar-cane fields like fingers accusing the sea, the island's commanders stirred from their calculations. Not in panic, but in the quiet certainty of men who had scripted glory before. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo and General Yoshitsugu Saitō, two pillars of the empire, etched in the annals of conquest, now tasked with holding the line against a tide they could not fathom. Their faith was not mere bravado. It was doctrine distilled from the blood of 1,000 battles. Japan did not conquer with numbers. It conquered with Saipan, spirit, unyielding as the samurai's blade. But spirit, like steel, could bend under heat it never anticipated. Nagumo's command cave in Garapan, carved into the basalt cliffs like a dragon's lair, hummed with the low murmur of aids and the scratch of pencils on rice paper charts. The air was thick with the scent of kerosene lanterns and damp earth, a subterranean world where maps unfolded like prophecies. Nagumo himself, at 57, cut a figure of restrained elegance, his white gloves immaculate, his greatcoat draped over a chair like a shed skin. He had been the architect of infamy, the man whose carriers had birthed the raid on Pearl Harbor 3 Decembers past. December 7, 1941. 353 aircraft screaming from the decks of the Akagi, Kaga, Soren-Hiryu, turning America's Pacific Fleet into a pyre of twisted metal and black smoke. Battleship Arizona had erupted in a pillar of fire that lit the horizon, a false dawn for the Empire's ascent. Nagumo had watched from the Akagi's bridge, his face a mask of tactical poise, as the world reordered itself in Japan's image. "We have awakened a sleeping giant," his chief of staff had murmured that day, quoting Yamamoto's Ghost. Nagumo had silenced him with a glance. "No, we have shown him the edge of our will. He will break upon it." And for a time, it seemed true. The Philippines fell like overripe fruit. Singapore's fortress crumbled under midnight bicycles and silent infiltration. The Dutch East Indies yielded oil to fuel the dream. Nagumo's fleets had danced across the ocean, untouchable, their zeros carving swaths through P-40s like kites in a gale. But midway, June 1942 had been the first fracture. 4 carriers lost to American dive bombers, luck masquerading as daring. Nagumo had withdrawn, his orders crisp even in retreat. Preserve the fleet, the spirit endures. Spirit. That word again, a talisman against the ledgers of loss. Now, in the cave's flickering light, Nagumo traced a finger along the Marianas chain on his map. Saipan, Tinian, Guam, like beads on an abacus of defense. The combined fleet under Ozawa would counter the American thrust. His air groups, though thinned to 430 planes scattered across fields pocked by prior raids, would sting from the shadows. Saito's ground forces, 29,000 strong, bolstered by 6,000 Korean laborers and Chamorro conscripts, formed the anvil. Nagumo's navy the hammer. The doctrine was clear. Attrition through banzai, not mindless charge, but calculated frenzy, drawing the enemy into kill zones where will outmatched machinery. The Americans fight for comfort, he said now to his aide, the unseen from earlier, who stood ramrod straight despite the sweat beading his brow. We fight for eternity. Let their probes exhaust themselves on our reefs. The true assault comes from the north. Eniwatak's echo. The aide nodded, though his eyes darted to the radio console, where a faint crackle hinted at the morning's reports. Diversion. Feint. Hold fire. Nagumo poured himself sake from a lacquered flask, small sips ritualistic, his mind replaying Pearl Harbor's roar. the thunder of Kate torpedoes kissing the Oklahoma's hull, the silk scarves of pilots whipping in the wind as they banked for home. That victory had bought Japan 18 months of unchallenged reach. Saipan would buy more. We are the storm they fear, he thought, the italics of conviction steadying his pulse. But beneath it, unbidden, Midway's dive bombers wheeled in memory, black crosses against the sun, bombs falling like indifferent gods. He pushed it down. Doctrine demanded faith. Across the island, in a bamboo-reinforced bunker amid the cane fields of central Saipan, General Yoshitsugu Saitō prepared for the anvil's tempering. At 50, Saitō was the soldier's soldier. Wiry, bespectacled, his uniform faded from Manchuria's dust and Shanghai's rains. No admiral's polish here, just the quiet ferocity of a man who had risen through the ranks on merit and massacre. His career was a tapestry of triumphs woven with the thread of unbreakable resolve. The 1937 assault on Nanking, where his division had carved through Chinese lines with bayonets and belief. The 1941 push into Malaya, outflanking British garrisons with night marches that left trails of exhausted ghosts. Saitō had stood on Singapore's waterfront in February 42, watching British prisoners file past, 100,000 souls bent under the weight of misjudged will. See, he'd told his colonels then, voice low amid the tramp of boots. Their machines rust without men to wield them. Ours burn brighter in defeat. Saitō's doctrine was the army's creed made flesh. The decisive battle writ small on every island. Dig deep. Bunkers laced with mutually supporting fire, reverse slope defenses on Mount Tapuachau's flanks, minefields that funneled attackers into enfilade. His 47th Independent Mixed Brigade, veterans of the brutal Rabaul sieges, manned the lines. Type 92 machine guns nested in caves, 120mm mortars zeroed on the beaches. Hago tanks, light, nimble, poised for counter-thrusts in the defiles. Civilians, too. 20,000 Japanese settlers and locals, drilled in the Taishan militia, clutching Arisaka rifles or sharpened bamboo. Women and children in the rear, packing bandages and grenades, their faces set in the stoic mask of Gamen, endurance as armor. In the bunker, Saitō bent over a topographic model of Saipan, cliffs rising like frozen waves, beaches etched in red ink as kill zones. Kawaguchi, the scar-faced lieutenant colonel from the heights, had just arrived, binoculars slung like a yoke, his report crisp. General, the first wave licks the shore. 8,000 perhaps. Scattered. Their bombardment was fierce but incomplete. We held fire as ordered. They commit piecemeal, as at Tarawa. Saitō adjusted his glasses, peering at the model as if willing the enemy to appear in miniature. Good. Let them bleed on the reef. Our artillery conserves for the main effort. Radio Nagumo. Air support at noon to scatter their nests. Kawaguchi hesitated, the morning's laughter now a faint echo in his throat. Sir, the transports multiply. Scout boats count 30, no 40 beyond the barrage line. LSTs unloading tractors even. Saitō waved it off, his voice steady as a kendo master's strike. Diversionary shapes. The Americans telegraph their feints, Guadalcanal taught us that. Their logistics strain at distance, ours thrive on proximity. Spirit will multiply us tenfold. Yamato Demashi, the great soul of Japan. Unconquerable, eternal. Saitō had invoked it at every briefing, not fanaticism, but focus. The banzai was no death wish, it was the blade's edge, turned at the moment of enemy fatigue. His men believed it because he did. Because the empire's propaganda mills ground out victories like sak from rice, and defeats like Midway were anomalies, not augurs. Yet in quieter moments, Saitō's mind wandered to the letters from home, his wife's careful script, the children's drawings of Zero fighters soaring over Tokyo Bay. Hold the line, they implored without words. Saipan was no outer rock, it was the doormat to the home islands. Lose it, and B-29s would carpet the capital in fire, bombs from bases that turned sacred soil into runways. He straightened, clapping Kawaguchi's shoulder with the grip of camaraderie forged in Nanking's mud. We are not defenders, Colonel. We are the storm's eye. They come to us exhausted. We meet them renewed. Laughter stirred again among the staff officers, warmer now, buoyed by the general's calm. Radios crackled affirmations, positions secure, ammunition tallied, patrols reporting only the sputter of American engineers bridging the reef. Intercut with these counsels, the American beachhead pulsed with contrary rhythm, not frenzy, but method. General Holland, Howlin Mad Smith, 62, bull-necked and profane, stalked the sands of Red Beach 2 from an LST's deck, his bulldog face twisted in perpetual scowl. Smith had whipped the Marines into shape since the 20s, turning doughboys into devils at Bellowwood's Echo. Tarawa had scarred him, 1,000 dead in 76 hours. But Saipan was redemption. 3 divisions, 71,000 troops total, with Army's 27th Infantry to follow. "Push, goddammit," he bellowed to a company captain knee-deep in surf, directing amphibious trucks, hauling 105mm howitzers ashore. "I want that airfield by sundown, or I'll court-martial the tide itself." The captain, sweat-streaked and barking orders, "Secure the wire, flankers up," saluted without breaking stride. Smith's aggression was no tantrum. It was the whip to industry, cracking over supply lines that stretched 3,500 miles from Pearl. Crates of 30 cal ammo stacked like cordwood, jeeps revving through mine-cleared lanes, horsemen stitching wounds under palm-frond lean-toes. Private Sledge, hunkered in his first foxhole, a hasty scoop of coral grit, watched the build-up with a mix of awe and nausea. The air thrummed with the whine of uncles. Cargo planes, ditching supplies from low passes, pallets parachuting like bizarre jellyfish. "This ain't charging a hill," he thought, "it's building a city on one." The sergeant nearby, reloading a water-cooled Brownings, grunted agreement to no one. "Japs think we're probing. Wait till they see the evening rush. 50,000 of us, and every damn one with a grudge." By midday, the beachhead spanned 2 miles. Bulldozers gouging roads, Seabees welding pontoons into causeways, the 2nd Marine Division's regiments fanning inland toward Charan-Kanoa. Casualties mounted, 127 by noon, but reinforcements flowed unchecked. The 4th Marines landing intact, their bands playing the Marines' hymn as if mocking the silence from the bluffs. Japanese spotters on Topochau tallied the ships now, 300 hulls, a steel armada eclipsing the horizon. Whispers crept into the bunkers. Not a feint? But doctrine smothered them. Nagumo ordered a noon strike, 54 Vals and Judies from carriers off Tinian, only to see them shredded by Hellcats, 29 planes down, the rest limping home fuel dry. Saitō repositioned a battalion to the 01 line, the island's spine, his faith unshaken. "They test our edges, we harden the core." Nagumo and Saitō, titans of yesterday's dawn, peered into today's gathering storm through lenses etched by past glories. Pearl Harbor's fire, Singapore's surrender, these were their scriptures, whispering that will alone bent worlds. Saipan's defenses, layered like the folds of a samurai's haori, promised the same: cliffs as moats, caves as citadels, spirit as the unbreachable wall. They coordinated by wire and runner, navy and army in rare harmony, blind to the evolution slithering ashore, not men charging but machines embedding, numbers compounding like interest on an empire's debt. They had built an island fortress, but not an escape from the past. By early afternoon on June 15, 1944, Saipan's beaches were no longer fringes of coral and wire. They were bridges, pontoons of steel and timber snaking from reef to shore, groaning under the weight of an invasion that refused to pause. What had begun as a ripple of Higgins boats now swelled into a deluge. LSTs beaching like iron behemoths, their bow doors yawning to disgorge tanks and half-tracks in a belch of diesel fumes and churning sand. The air thickened with the salt sting of spray and the acrid bite of cordite, punctuated by the relentless chatter of 50 cal Brownings suppressing fire from the bluffs. This was not chaos for its own sake. It was the choreography of capacity, where every wave delivered not just men, but the machinery of momentum. And from the island's heights, the laughter of the morning curdled into something sharper, disquiet, whispering through the bunkers like wind through cane. On Red Beach 1, amid the snarl of bulldozers clawing paths through Dragon's Teeth, Private Eugene Sledge's platoon pressed inland, their boots sucking at the muck of a taro patch, turned to slurry by mortar bursts. The 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, veterans of the Solomon's Green Hell, flanked left toward Aslito Airfield, Garons barking in disciplined bursts at shadows in the brush. Sledge's breath came in ragged hitches, his pack a leaden anchor, the metallic tang of fear sharp on his tongue. A Japanese Nambu nest, camouflaged in a culvert, opened up, tracers lacing the air like fiery wasps. "Down! Suppressive fire!" the sergeant roared, his Thompson chattering as he flanked with a fire team. Sledge fired from the hip, the M1's recoil a jolt through his shoulder. rounds stitching the foliage until a grenade, pinned and lobbed with a curse, silenced the chatter. Silence fell, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the distant rumble of naval guns walking fire ahead. Sledge, inner thought, gasping as he reloads, fingers slick with sweat and mud. They're close, too close, but we're not stopping. God, the boats, more every minute. He glanced seaward, and there it was, the scale. Beyond the smoke-hazed line of the bombardment, the fleet had metastasized. What Kawaguchi's scouts had tallied as 40 hulls now neared 300, cruisers like the Indianapolis weaving fire support patterns, oilers threading supply lines like veins to a beating heart. LCIs, landing craft infantry, slammed ashore in 5s and 6s, ramps dropping to spill entire companies. The 6th Marines, fresh from Kwajalein, their guidons snapping in the breeze. Engineers swarmed the beaches like ants on a carcass, welding causeways from LCVPs, manhandling 155mm long toms from Duke-Cubbies that splashed through the surf like improbable ducks. By 1400 hours, 20,000 Marines were ashore, tanks rumbling over the dunes, their 75mm howitzers zeroed on inland ridges. Casualties climbed, 300 dead or wounded, corpsmen darting through the fray with morphine syrettes and plasma bags, their cries, "Hold on, Mac! Pressure here," a counterpoint to the screams. But the line advanced. 1,000 yards inland by dusk, the first foxholes dug on the edges of Karen Kanoa, the island's sugar mill town smoldering under star shells. General Holland, Howlin Mad Smith, perched on a jury-rigged command post atop an upturned LST, barked into a field phone, his voice a gravel whip over the din. "Turner, you old bastard, your fire's walking too slow. I need those 16-inchers on Hill 500 now, and get me more ammo. My boys are chewing through belts like candy." On the other end, Admiral Turner's reply crackled back, unflappable. "Steady, Howlin. You've got 800 tons inbound by nightfall. Push 'em, but don't bleed 'em dry. This is a sprint to the runways, not a slugfest." Smith slammed the receiver, turning to his ops officer, a harried major sketching positions on a damp map. "Tell the 4th Regiment, envelop the cane fields. No pauses. If the Japs counter, we'll drown 'em in steel." His aggression was the spark to the machine. Spotter planes, OS-2U Kingfishers, buzzed overhead, radioing coordinates for counter-battery fire that turned Japanese 75mm into slag before they could elevate. The beachhead wasn't holding. It was expanding, a cancer of khaki and olive drab metastasizing across Saipan's flank. Up on Mount Tapachau, where the air grew thin and the views stretched to eternity's edge, Lieutenant Colonel Kawaguchi's observation post became a cauldron of mounting reports. The concrete pillbox, its slits embrasured like wary eyes, vibrated with the muffled thuds of distant shells. American battleships offloading their broadsides, each 1,900-pound projectile a hammer on the anvil of the island. Kawaguchi, sweat carving rivulets down his scarred face, snatched the field phone from a runner, his voice taut as a bowstring. "What do you mean, transports beyond counting? Give me numbers, damn you." The reply from a forward spotter was breathless, laced with static. "Colonel, hundreds, sir. LSTs beaching 10 at a time. Tanks, Shermans, rolling off like they own the tide. Enemy infantry, 20,000, advancing on Karen Kanoa. Our mortars barely dent them." Kawaguchi slammed the receiver, turning to his gathered officers, faces pale under helmet shadows, cigarettes trembling in lips. "This is no probe. Radio General Saitō. Request immediate artillery barrage on the beaches. All batteries concentrate on the causeways." But hesitation's ghost lingered. The morning's orders, "Conserve for the feint's end," had chained the guns. Now, as runners dashed with flares, the first salvos erupted. 105mm howitzers from the central ridges, lobbing high-explosive rounds that arced like vengeful stars, plunging into the surf with geysers of foam and shrapnel. One shell caught an LCI mid-unload, 12 Marines shredded in a crimson spray, the craft listing as its guts spilled crates into the drink. Cheers rippled through the Japanese lines. "Banzai! Break them!" a gun crew chanted, slamming home fresh rounds, but the response was biblical. From the Colorado, 16-inch guns belched flame, orange tongues licking the sea, sending shells that screamed inland at 2,500 feet per second, cratering Kawaguchi's own ridge in a cataclysm of rock and fire. The pillbox shuddered, dust sifting from the ceiling like ash from a funeral pyre. A runner burst in, uniform singed. "Sir, naval fire. Our forward battery silenced. They're bridging the gaps faster than we shell them." Kawaguchi peered through his binoculars, the lenses fogged with humidity and dread. The beaches crawled, no, swarmed with motion. CBs welding under fire, their acetylene torches, defiant sparks. Amtraks churning forward, belching troops onto the dunes. P-47 Thunderbolts from Eniwetok streaking low, 50 cals hosing pillboxes with leaden rain. The scale hit like vertigo. This was no Tarawa slaughter, no reef-choked charnel house. America didn't charge blindly. It calculated the cost and paid it in bulk. How many ships? How many men? Kawaguchi's mind reeled, the doctrine's certainty fracturing. The pattern, Guadalcanal's probes, Biak's hesitations, it's broken. He barked orders, voice cracking the air. Redirect the tanks. Hagos to the defile at 500 yards. Flank their engineers and get me Nagumo. Airstrike now. But the radios hissed with overload. Lines cut by shrapnel. Operators dead in their webs. In Garapan's caves, Admiral Nagumo felt the tremor first as vibration through the stone, then as words from a frantic liaison. "Admiral, the landings hold. Enemy scale exceeds estimates. 50,000 projected by nightfall. Saitō requests carrier support." Nagumo's sake cut paused midair, his silver hair catching the lantern's flicker like frost on a blade. Pearl Harbor's memory surged. The audacity of striking first, the enemy's stunned recoil. But this was no harbor slumbering. He strode to the chart table, jabbing a finger at the Marianas plot. "Launch all available. Zeros for Cap, Vals for the beaches. Ozawa's fleet is en route. We'll bleed them until then." His aide, the ensign, saluted sharply but faltered. "Sir, fuel reserves at 20%. And they're Hellcats." Nagumo cut him with a glare, the weight of Midway unspoken. "Spirit fuels the wings. Go." Within minutes, 20 Zeros clawed skyward from Maslito's battered strip, only to tangle with 200 F-6Fs in the afternoon haze. The dogfight was a turkey shoot. 30 Japanese planes spiraling into the sea, black smoke trails like accusatory fingers. Nagumo watched from a slit, the explosions distant pops over the waves, his inner thought a steel clamp. They adapt. We endure. General Saitō, in his central bunker, orchestrated the riposte with the precision of a no-master. Gestures spare, eyes unblinking behind spectacles. Reports flooded in, beaches secured against counter-battery, but inland pushes gaining. Marines seizing the first cane fields, their flamethrowers charring undergrowth to reveal hidden snipers. Saitō adjusted his model, shifting pins, commit the 18th Infantry, reverse slope on 01 line. Mortars on the causeways, draw them into the kill zones. His colonels nodded, but doubt crept in whispers. "General, their numbers." The civilians report endless ships like the horizon itself invades. Saito's reply was iron. "Numbers break on resolve. We've held worse with less." Banzai at the moment of their overreach. Yet as he spoke, the earth trembled anew. American long toms now emplaced, thundering in reply. Shells walked the ridges, turning a Type 95 tank crew into vapor before their engine turned over. Saitō paused, the silence after each blast a judgment. The Americans didn't falter. They fortified. Engineers bridging reefs under umbrella smoke, corpsmen evacuating wounded on floating litters, the endless unload of jeeps and rations turning beach into boulevard. By 1800 the sun dipped blood red, painting the surf in alizarin strokes. 34,000 Marines ashore, half the assault force, foxholes linking into company perimeters, the airfield's edges probed by patrols. Japanese casualties, 2,000 estimated, their artillery down 30%, probes repulsed by naval fire that turned counterattacks to pyres. Kawaguchi, descending from Topochau under runner escort, past burning Hagos, crews clawing from hatches, faces blackened. "It was a feint," one gasped. Kawaguchi knelt, gripping the man's collar. "No more. This is the storm." The realization spread like ink in water. Radios buzzing, enemy capacity unlimited, spotters tallying 500 ships, the sea a steel plain unbroken to the east. Nagumo's surviving pilots limped back, debriefing in hoarse tones. Their fighters, everywhere, like locusts. Saitō, alone in his bunker as aides tallied the dead, removed his glasses, rubbing temples where doubt throbbed. Doctrine holds. It must. But the wind carried it now. The hum of American generators starting, the clank of tracks on new roads, the silence of conserved shells wasted in revelation. As the first stars pricked the velvet sky, Saipan's defenders fired their salvos, not into fear but into the unyielding face of resolve. Waves crashed not with retreat but reinforcement. Shells fell not on faltering lines but on foundations laid in hours. The chaos was theirs, the scale America's, and in every echo of thunder, the illusion cracked wider. Japan's fortress not besieged but bypassed by the very tide it had mocked. Every shell they fired revealed not American fear, but American resolve. Nightfall on June 15th draped Saipan in a shroud of ink-black velvet, pierced only by the staccato flares of Pei's very pistols and the sullen glow of burning cane. The island, once a green bastion of defiance, now pulsed with the discordant symphony of war. The low growl of American generators spinning up under camouflage nets, the wet smack of shovels carving deeper foxholes, the distant cough of Japanese mortars probing the dark like blind fingers. What had been a beachhead at dawn was now a lodgment, files-mide, too deep, crisscrossed by trails lit by chem lights and patrolled by tense sentries whispering passwords into the humid void. But beneath the surface calm, the fortress stirred. Saitō and Nagumo, their doctrines dented but unyielding, plotted the night's riposte. Not a retreat, but a revelation in steel and fury. The banzai would rise, not as desperation but as doctrines do. Tanks to the fore, infantry in their wake, crashing into the American lines like a wave reclaiming the shore. Spirit would shatter machinery, or so the creed promised, even as the sea whispered otherwise. In the central bunker's dim confines, General Yoshitsugu Saitō stood over his topographic model, the air heavy with the funk of unwashed uniforms and spent powder. Lanterns cast elongated shadows, turning his bespectacled face into a mask of carved resolve, lines etched deeper by the day's dispatches. Reports lay scattered like fallen leaves. 4,000 Japanese dead or missing, artillery batteries reduced to twisted hulks, the 01 line's flanks exposed by marine envelopments that had seized half of Karan Kanoa by twilight. Saito's fingers drummed the table's edge, a metronome of calculation. The Americans, 41,000 ashore now, their perimeter a jagged scar of barbed wire and trip flares, dug with the fervor of moles, not men. They build as they kill, he thought, the italics of unwelcome insight coiling in his gut. But doctrine was his anchor. The banzai counterthrust, honed in the Solomon's muck, where a single charge had turned tides of attrition. Tonight, it would be the 305th Regiment's turn. 1,200 rifles, backed by 9 Hago tanks from the 9th Tank Regiment, their 37mm guns primed for the soft underbelly of the Marine lines at the Kane Field Junction. Saitō, to his colonels, clustered like supplicants, voice steady but laced with the gravel of command's burden. The enemy tires after their day's labor, strike at midnight, tanks through the defile, infantry echelon behind. No quarter, no pause. Yamato Damashi will carve the beachhead from their grasp, for the Emperor. The colonels, hard men from Nanking's shadows, murmured assent, fists thumping breasts in ritual echo. Banzai, one intoned, the cry a spark in dry tinder. But in the pause that followed, a runner slipped in, bowing low with a bloodied dispatch. General, Nagumo reports air losses total. Their fighters own the dawn, but his submarines shadow their supply line, torpedoes by morning. Saitō nodded, masking the flicker in his eyes. Submarines, phantoms in the deep, more hope than hammer. The model before him mocked the gaps, red pins for lost positions, blue for American gains. We bleed them, he told himself, and in bleeding we bind. Yet the wind through the bunker vents carried alien sounds. The American clank of dozer blades, the hum of radiators cooling on newly landed half-tracks. Saitō straightened, donning his helmet like a crown of thorns. Commence at NO 100. May the gods guide the steel. As the officers dispersed into the night, Saitō lingered, tracing the island's spine with a fingertip. Tapachao to the beaches, a vein pulsing with the Empire's lifeblood. Hold, he willed it silently. Endure. Across Garapan's crumbling wharves, in the Navy's labyrinthine caves, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo orchestrated his contribution to the night's symphony. Not planes, grounded by the day's mauling, but the thunder of hidden batteries and the sting of infiltrators. The cave's walls wept condensation, maps updated in hasty crayon strokes showing the fleet's repositioning. Ozawa's carriers steaming south, a gambit to draw Turner's hunters away. Nagumo, his greatcoat shed, paced in shirt sleeves, the photo of Pearl Harbor's strike tucked into his breast pocket like a talisman. Midway's ghosts hovered, The dive bombers wail, the Akagi's deck buckling under 1,000-pound fury. But Saipan was redemption. Navy and army entwined, the banzai a shared blade. His orders: coastal guns to rake the causeways at dawn, sappers to the beaches under cover of the assault, zeros held for the counterpunch. "The ground fight buys us time," he said to his liaison from Saito's staff, a gaunt major nursing a bandaged arm. "Their logistics are our target. Cut the vein, and the beast bleeds out." The major nodded, but his voice cracked with the day's wear. "Admiral, the tanks, the Hagos are light. They're Shermans." Nagumo's glare silenced him, the admiral's hand clasping the man's shoulder with iron camaraderie. "Shermans burn like any steel. Spirit turns the turret. Inform Saitō, my fire will walk with your charge." As the liaison departed, Nagumo sank into a folding chair, the cave's silence amplifying the distant surf. A rhythmic dirge. Pearl Harbor was audacity, he reflected. Midway misfortune. This is necessity. Aides bustled with radio checks, but the set spat static. American jamming, or worse, the ether choked with their endless chatter. Nagumo lit a cigarette, the flame's bloom illuminating eyes hollowed by the weight of command. The Empire's doctrine, unbreakable defense, fanatical riposte, had held the outer islands, turned Guadalcanal into a meat grinder. Saipan would be its pinnacle, or its pyre. Midnight struck like a muffled gong, the moon a sickle sliver veiled by scudding clouds. From the defile south of Karen Kanoa, the Japanese counterattack uncoiled, a serpent of shadow and steel. 9 Hagas lurched forward, their 7.7-ton frames rattling over rutted tracks, engines coughing blue smoke that the breeze whisked inland. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka, commander of the tank company, 32, face boyish under his dust-caked helmet, gripped the periscope, heart hammering in sync with the treads. His crew, a loader from Osaka, a gunner scarred from Rabaul, whispering prayers to Amaterasu. "Forward at speed," Tanaka ordered, voice amplified in the turret's coffin close. "Flank their wire, infantry, follow in the smoke." Behind them, the 305th surged. 1,200 shadows in khaki, bayonets fixed, Arasakas slung low, their advance a rustle of cane and muffled banzai chants building like thunder. Saitō watched from a forward OP, binoculars steady, the night alive with the armor's growl. Kawaguchi at his side murmured, "They come like ghosts, General. The Americans sleep." Saito's reply was a whisper, "They dream of home, we bring them hell." The assault struck the 6th Marine's perimeter like a blade through silk, initially. The lead Hago, its machine gun chattering, shredded a listening post. 3 Marines cut down in their foxhole, screams swallowed by the roar. Tanaka's gunner traversed, the 37mm barking, shell punching a sandbag revetment, flames blooming as ammo crates cooked off. "Banzai!" the infantry howled, surging through the gap, bayonets flashing in starlight, cutting down a machine gun crew in a frenzy of steel and guttural cries. For a heartbeat, the line buckled, a platoon sergeant bellowing, "Incoming! Mount up, fall back to secondary," as his men scrambled for cover, Garan's snapping wild in the dark. Sledge, jolted awake in his slit trench, fumbled his rifle, the world erupting in tracers and shadows. Tanks, God tanks, his mind reeled, the ground quaking under treads that chewed earth like hungry beasts. A Hago loomed, its turret swiveling. Sledge's fire team opened up, 30 cal rounds pinging off armor like hail on tin. But the serpent struck iron. From the American depths, the response was not panic, but precision, a calculus of fire uncoiling in the night. Spotter flares popped overhead, bathing the defile in magnesium glare, turning attackers to silhouettes against the cane. Then the bazookas sang, 2.36-inch rockets streaking from foxholes, their warheads, shaped charges honed in Detroit's forges, punching through Hago thin plating like hot knives through butter. Tanaka's lead tank shuddered, the rocket's kiss erupting the ammo bin in a gout of flame. The turret hatch blew skyward, crews spilling out ablaze, their screams a prelude to silence. "Reload! Traverse left!" Tanaka gasped. But the second rocket found the flank, the world inverting in fire and shrapnel. His gunner slumped, gore slick. The loader clawed at the escape hatch, only to meet the storm of Marine fire. Thompsons and bars hosing the wreckage. Saitō, through binoculars from his ridge, saw the first bloom. Press flank left. But Nagumo's promised fire, coastal 120mm, balked, their crews pinned by counter-battery from emplaced 105s that walked the batteries into oblivion. Then the heavies awoke offshore. The Maryland's 16-inchers, zeroed by radar in the murk, arcing shells that descended like avenging comets. The earth convulsed, craters yawning where infantry clustered, bodies hurled like rag dolls, the banzai chorus fracturing into wails. A second Hago brewed up, its fuel tanks rupturing in a whoosh that lit the cane like a torch procession. The crew bailed, only to wither under flamethrowers. Napalm streams from M22s charring flesh to carbon in seconds. "Burners up, light 'em." A Marine lieutenant yelled, the whoomph of Prometheum a devil's breath, turning Japanese shadows to writhing pyres. Kawaguchi, directing from a shell hole, felt the unraveling. His regiment, funneled into the killing ground, shredded by interlocking fire, machine guns enfilading from elevated positions, mortars airbursting to rain shrapnel like iron confetti. "Fall back, regroup," he screamed, but the tide had turned. American reserves, the 29th Marines, held in depth, countercharged with bayonets and grenades, their war whoops a profane hymn. Sledge, surging with his squad, bayoneted a falling figure, the man's eyes wide with shock, not hate, then ducked as a dying Hago's gun traversed wild, its rounds chewing the air. By 0230, the assault dissolved. 800 Japanese dead in the defile, tanks reduced to husks smoldering like beached whales, survivors fleeing into the brush, bayonets trailing bloodied rags. Saitō lowered his glasses, the silence after the storm a condemnation. Radios silent, runners not returning. Doctrine faltered. Nagumo in his cave heard it piecemeal, the assault's roar fading to echoes, then the grim tallies, tanks annihilated, infantry mauled. He clutched the liaison's arm as the man staggered in, uniform rent. "Admiral, they burned them. The fire, it ate the steel." Nagumo's face, illuminated by a dying lantern, cracked, not in tears, but in the raw etch of realization. Pearl Harbor's audacity mocked him now. America once slumbering, now a forge of unquenchable industry. "Prepare the caves," he murmured. "The banzai was our dawn. This night, our dusk." Dawn crept gray, revealing the carnage. Marine patrols picking through the wreckage, medics triaging the few Japanese prisoners, wounded men clutching photos of wives, their eyes hollow with the creed's collapse. Saitō, descending to survey the field, stepped over a charred Hago track, the air reeking of charred rubber and regret. Kawaguchi met him there, face ashen. "General, it's over. Their line holds, expands. We fight from shadows now." Saitō nodded, the wind carrying the scent of a burning cane inland, a pyre for illusions. The unraveling spread. Civilians in Garapan, roused by the night's thunder, huddled in cellars as American patrols probed the town, their advance unhurried, inexorable. A Chamorro family, caught in crossfire, wept silently as courtmen offered water, Empire's pawns in the smoke. By morning's light, the beachhead swelled to 50,000, the full assault force ashore, runways under repair, the island's spine in peril. Saitō and Nagumo conferred by wire, voices stripped bare. "We hold the interior," Saitō said. "But at what cost?" Nagumo's reply, "The cost of eternity." But the maps lied no more. The blue tide lapped higher, the red lines fracturing like fault lines before the quake. As the sun rose on the charnel fields, Japanese steel lay twisted and spent, the banzai's fury extinguished not by cowardice, but by the cold arithmetic of opposition. Commanders, once architects of dawn, now witnessed the blueprint's flaw, spirit, unarmored against the barrage of plenty. Tanks burned not in glory, but in the harsh light of adaptation's glare. America's war not of blades but of boundless replacement. And in the crumbling watch, the fortress's walls whispered the truth long ignored. The smoke that rose from Saipan wasn't defeat, it was revelation. Dawn on June 16, 1944, broke over Saipan like a reluctant confessor, its light spilling across a landscape remade in the night's forge. The cane fields, once verdant sentinels, lay blackened and stubble-strewn, smoldering pyres marking the banzai's grave. The air hung heavy with the char of cordite and charred foliage, undercut by the sweeter rot of unburied dead, Japanese and American alike, tangled in the defile like discarded marionettes. From the beaches, where bulldozers now hummed in methodical cadence, the island's spine rose scarred. Tapachau's cliffs pocked with fresh craters, Garapan's warehouses skeletal against the sky. But the true transformation was in motion, not ruin. The American lodgment, swollen to 50,000 souls by midnight's end, pulsed with purpose. Seabees grading runways on Oslito's flattened strip, engineers stringing wire for tent cities, quartermasters offloading crates of sea rations and 90mm shells from LSTs that beached like clockwork. This was no occupation, it was inception, the birth of bases that would stretch fingers to Tokyo's throat. And in the command caves, where silence had replaced the radio's frantic chatter, two men confronted the ledger's final tally. Not lives lost, but illusions shattered. General Yoshitsugu Saitō emerged from his bunker into the morning's pallid glow, his uniform caked in the night's dust, spectacles fogged by the humidity's embrace. The defile below was a tableau of consequence. Hago hulks twisted like the limbs of felled giants, their treads frozen in futile advance, bodies strewn in khaki and olive, bayonets still clutched like talismans against the inevitable. A runner, bandaged and hollow-eyed, approached with a field phone dangling from his shoulder. General Nagumo on the line. The assault repulsed. Losses 900 in the charge, 2,000 total overnight. Saitō took the receiver, his voice a threadbare rasp over the wire. Understood. Regroup the remnants to O2 line. Conserve ammunition. Guerrilla now, not counter-thrust. The words tasted of ash, the doctrine's blade dulled to a farmer's scythe. Yamato Demashi, the great spirit, invoked in every briefing, etched on every man's heart, had met not just Marines but the machinery of modernity. Bazookas that pierced light armor like paper lanterns, flamethrowers that turned caves to infernos, at naval barrages that outranged mountains. Saitō lowered the phone, gazing seaward where the fleet lay unassailable, its destroyers plying picket lines like shepherds of steel. We fought as warriors, he thought, the italics of introspection a quiet indictment. They fought as a nation. Civilians stirred in the wake of the rout. Japanese settlers from the cane plantations, Chamorro families long subjugated, their homes now craters ringed by concertina wire. A mother, clutching a child to her skirts, picked through the rubble of Garapan's market, her eyes wide at the advancing patrols. Marines not looting, but offering K-rations and gestures of wary truce. No fight. Surrender? A cordman called in broken pidgin, extending a canteen. The woman nodded, trembling as her son stared at the khaki figures with the mix of terror and wonder only children muster. In the interior, militias disbanded in whispers, bamboo spears traded for white flags, the Taishan dream dissolving in the face of leaflets fluttering from P-47s. Saipan is lost. Save your families. Saito's heart clenched at the reports. Thousands streaming north, clogging roads to the caves, their flight a hemorrhage from the fortress's veins. He had drilled them in endurance, in the sacred soil's defense. Now that soil drank their fear and his own. The wind off the sea carried it all. Victory's salt mingled with regret's brine, a gust that rustled the cane like a collective sigh. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, in his Garapan redoubt, paced the chamber's confines as aides tallied the dawn's grim arithmetic. Air wing reduced to 150 planes, many grounded by parts scavenged from wrecks. Submarine reports confirming the fleet's invulnerability. Ozawa's carriers a distant feint swallowed by the Marianas turkey shoot yet to come. The cave's lanterns guttered low, casting his silver hair in sepia tones, the Pearl Harbor photo now a mocking relic on the table. Those carriers, once harbingers of dawn, reduced to memories amid fuel drums hoarded like dragon's gold. A staff officer, voice quavering, relayed Saito's shift to guerrilla tactics. Admiral, the general concedes the beaches. We fall back to the mountains. Harass, delay. Nagumo halted, his gloved hand clenching the map's edge until paper tore like skin. Delay? This is no delay. This is the end of the perimeter. His mind replayed the night's inferno. The Hago's charge, brave as samurai, met by the unseen fist of radar-directed fire, shells falling not in volleys, but in predicted patterns, as if the Americans read the future in their ledgers. Midway had been a gamble lost. Saipan, a certainty betrayed. Prepare my staff, he said finally, voice regaining its polish. We join Saitō at Tapochau. The Emperor's soil demands our final witness. As he spoke, a distant rumble echoed. The first B-29 scout from Eniwetok, a silver needle threading the sky, its shadow a portent over the runways already scarred for concrete. Nagumo watched it wheel away, inner thought a blade's keen edge. We struck their dawn. They eclipse our sun. By week's end, Saipan's fall accelerated like a stone loosed down a cliff. The 27th Infantry Division, Army boys relieving the Marines' gut spearhead, pushed north through the cane, their Shermans grinding paths where Hagos had faltered, flamethrower teams rooting snipers from banana groves with bursts that painted the air orange. Casualties mounted on both sides, 3,000 Americans by the 20th, but Japanese losses spiraled, 10,000 combat dead, thousands more in civilian flight. Saitō and Nagumo, now co-located in Topochau's summit caves, coordinated the death throes. Ambushes in the defiles, night raids that drew blood but bought only hours. On July 7th, the end came not in a blaze but a ritual's hush. Saitō, gaunt and resolute, gathered his officers in a cavern lit by a single bulb. The fortress holds no more. We strike one last banzai, not for victory but honor for the emperor. Nagumo, at his side, nodded, his uniform immaculate even in defeat. The navy stands with the army. Let our end be their warning. At dusk, 4,000 survivors, soldiers, sailors, even civilians armed with kitchen knives, charged from the caves, a human tide crashing against the 105th Regiment's lines. Bazookas and bars reaped them in the fading light, the banzai cries fading to gasps amid the cane. Saitō fell bayonet-pierced, his body later found with glasses askew, a final testament to the tactician unbowed. Nagumo, true to Pearl Harbor's architect, turned his service pistol inward. A single report echoing in the cave, his aides following in seppuku's solemn wake. The silence that followed was profound. No cheers from the Marines, only the wind's low moan, carrying the metallic click of safeties engaged and the trembling earth settling into peace. Tokyo felt the quake on July 9th. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo, the iron fist that had gripped the war since Pearl Harbor's spark, received the cable in his office amid the humid sprawl of the capital. Saipan lost. Commanders fallen. The room's shoji screens rattled as if in judgment, aides frozen in the doorway. Tojo, 59 and hollowed by insomnia, crumpled the paper, his voice a whip's crack. This cannot stand. The inner perimeter breaches, B-29s will blacken our skies. But the generals murmured dissent. Saipan's fall unmasked the doctrine's rot. The decisive battle a delusion in the face of island-hopping calculus. By evening, Tojo tendered resignation, his cabinet dissolving like mist at dawn. Emperor Hirohito, in the imperial palace's shadowed halls, accepted it with a bow that hid a nation's tremor. The war, once a divine mandate, now a desperate calculus of survival. Newsreels in Tokyo's theaters spun it as a pivot, not a plunge, but whispers spread, civilians hoarding rice, air raid drills turning frantic, the horizon no longer a promise, but a threat. From Saipan's conquered dust rose the runways. First Aslito, rechristened Idley Field, its concrete poured amid the graves. By November, the 73rd Bomb Wing's B-29s thundered aloft. Enola Gay among them, engines distant hum a requiem for the old war, prelude to the atomic dawn. The island, once Japan's hinge, became America's anvil, bombs arcing to Nagoya and Hiroshima, each payload a consequence of that first, laughed-at landing. 50,000 Marines had not just taken soil, they had rewritten the Pacific's grammar, from honors poetry to industry's prose. Saipan's silence was no end, but an awakening. Japan, blinded by the warrior's myth, beheld the forge of the future, where arrogance, that swiftest of blinders, outpaced any bullet. Saitō and Nagumo, pillars of a creed forged in conquest, fell not to superior arms alone, but to the empire's failure to learn, mistaking hesitation for frailty, pattern for prophecy. They had built on spirit, America on supply chains that spanned oceans, intelligence that pierced veils, inevitability that ground mountains to dust. The moral etched in every crater. Empires topple not when they stop fighting, but when they cease adapting. The Americans didn't merely land on Saipan, they landed in the tomorrow Japan could not imagine. And in that wind-scoured hush, carrying both triumph's echo and lament's undertone, the Pacific whispered its truth. Every great power falls the moment it confuses confidence with clairvoyance. They laughed at the first landing, and never saw the last one coming. If you believe arrogance is the enemy of strategy, subscribe for more untold World War II revelations.